Hey, welcome by Homebrew with Christian. Today we're gonna make a double Trappist style beer, a Belgium type of ale. For the ingredients we use as a basic pale malt, together with some Cara Munich Type 2, some Munich malt. It has a color of 50 EBC, some wheat for the mouthfeel, and some sugar. First we fill a kettle with water. In this case we use 19 liters of water and we heat it till about 50 degrees Celsius. While the water is heating we will grind the malt. For this I use a roller mill of the brand Gorilla. I use a roll distance of 1.14 millimeters, 0.045 inch, and I fill the bucket of the grinder with the malt. Be careful when filling the bucket of the grinder not to overfill it, because due to the vibrations of the grinding you can spill it. If you use an electric grinder it goes way faster than manually. And when you grind, be careful not to make flour. So you have to open the cuff and release the core. You don't have to grind it so fine that you have flour. This will give problems. So this is good. Hereafter dump the grinded malt into the bucket of water, this preheated water, and set the temperature to the first step of your mash scheme. For me this is 67 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes. So for 1 hour we're gonna mash this nicely grinded barley, or this nicely grinded malt. I also insert a stirring mechanism. This is from Malt Mill. This helps me to convert the starch way better into sugars than with a spoon. As you can see, I have a double thermometer in the kettle. I use it to measure the temperature in the upper part of the kettle and the bottom part of the kettle. This differs 1, maybe 2 degrees Celsius. Then, when everything is started, I first take a sample which I will treat with iodine. Iodine colors the starch blue. So when no convection of starch into sugars has appeared, you will get a blue sample. Whereas when the starch is converted to sugars, you get a nicely brown sample. I will show you this later on. So now we let the sample rest for plus minus 60 minutes to convert all starches into sugars. Hereafter you can decide whether you want to take the temperature up to 78 degrees Celsius to stop the convection of starch into sugar. Sometimes this is not necessary when all starches has already been converted into sugar. So this is the second time we do the iodine test, and as you can see not much happens. So the iodine stays nicely yellow. This is the first sample and this is the second sample, and there is a bit of decoloring or coloring ongoing. So hereafter the mash scheme has finished, so we remove our stirring mechanism, and if you immediately clean it then it's very easy to clean, whereas if you leave it for half an hour everything gets sticky, so I always immediately clean it. So after removing the stirring mechanism I insert my filter. This is just a copper tube with some holes in the bottom, and this helps me to create a filter bed. The filter bed is made of the cuffs of the grain, and first we siphon a bit off into a bucket. So this first bit is clouded, and normally it's about 2, maybe 3 liters. And when the wort gets transparent, or very clear, it will not get transparent. When it gets clear, then I remove it or move the hose into the cooking kettle, and I will bring back the clouded wort onto my mash, so it gets refiltered, and after that I start sparging. This is also the moment to take a sample of the wort, just to see what the sugar content is of your brew. For this I use a refractometer, and I just do a little bit of wort on there before I start sparking. You don't see it on this video, but I took a sample just at the start. And the gravity, the sugar content of this mixture was 1.077. And then you can see, and this will take you a long time. This can take up to a half hour, 45 minutes before everything is nicely filtered. You definitely don't want to haste this. You don't want to rush it, because if your filter bed slips, so it closes and nothing will be filtered anymore, you have problems opening it. So then you have to steer your brew, your mash. You have to start filtering again. You have very gently have to start creating a filter bed, so you don't want to do it. At the end of the filtering, we also take a sample, and we see that the sugar content has dropped from a gravity of 1.077 to 1.03435. So there's quite some sugar we rinsed out of the grains. Hereafter we start our cooking, and this can take quite some time. And when it's cooking, we insert the first hops, and as you can see, due to the proteins, it tends to overboil. And to prevent this, you just add a little bit of cold water. And after 80 minutes, I insert my second hop and some of the sugar, just to assure the sugar content of my brew is up to what I want it to be, and that we have enough alcohol in the beer eventually. So the last 10 minutes of the boil, I also add a filter to filter out the hops, and I add my cooling mechanism. And I do this 10 minutes before the end, so it is clean. I cleaned it with regular tap water, but just to make sure there's no bacteria growing on there, I just boil it for 10 minutes. You also see me cleaning. That's a big part of the brewing process. We have to assure that we work hygienically and that everything stays clean and is not sticky. So after the boil, I add 1 liter of cold water and I start my cooling. You can also use a plate cooler for this. I have this cooling spiral, works fine for me, and in about 10-20 minutes it's below 20 degrees Celsius. In parallel, I cleaned the fermentation buckets, and now I rinse the end of the hose to assure that there's nothing dangerous for our brew in there, so we don't have sour beer eventually. This batch I split in 2 buckets, as you can see, and as you can see on the washing machine, I have 1 bucket of homegrown yeast from a bottle of La Trappe. So one of my brews will get this bottle of homegrown yeast, and the other one will get a small bag of commercially available yeast. You can also see I took a measurement cylinder with some wort. I measure the gravity at the end once more using a hydrometer. And to make sure there is enough oxygen in there, I do not use an aquarium pump to oxidize the brew. I just dump it in a bit harsh, so you get a bit foam, and that brings enough oxygen. And you can see me pouring in the home brewed or the home cultured yeast. Sometimes I see people creating like a 2-3 liter flask of yeast for a 10 liter brew. It's absolutely not necessary. It's 500 milliliters of properly fermented or properly created yeast is more than enough. Then for the second, I also fill the second bucket. I insert the commercially available yeast. This is a Saf Brew 256 if I'm correct. I will put it there in the text above the movie. And then you can see when everything is empty, the fermentation bucket is full. And we close it and we insert some water in the water lock. And as you can see, my final measurement of the hydrometer ends at a 1.747. So we will get about 7 to 8% of alcohol. I also cleaned everything, and I would like to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, pop them under the video and let me know whether you like this.